It's fire season and crews are battling blazes around the Southwest, including the Doghead Fire in the Monzona Mountains near Albuquerque. And some of those firefighters include hotshot crews who work with hand tools on the front lines to contain blazes in the wilderness. In a 2013 fire in Arizona, 19 members of the Granite Mountain Hotshots perished in one of the deadliest days in American firefighting. Journalist Fernanda Santos delves into the lives of those men and their families in her new book, The Fire Line, and she spoke with NMIF correspondent Megan Kamerick.
Fernanda Santos, thank you for joining us on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what was it about this story that stuck with you that you wanted to dive into beyond the news stories that you usually write?
It was all the questions I had when I was reporting the story for the New York Times and I couldn't answer. I needed more time to understand how wildfires burn. I needed more time to understand who are these people who fight wildfires. And I needed to learn about these guys who I was writing about, but knew very, very little about. And I felt that the only way that I could satisfy my curiosity was to plunge headfirst into this project, and you know, which became the book that I wrote.
So talk about the hotshot crews. What role do they play in wildfire fighting? Who are hotshots?
Well, first thing to understand is that unlike a city fire where you roll in a truck and then you have a hydrant or maybe a tanker truck with water and you connect a hose to it and you dump water on the fire, wildfires are generally fought not with water but with hand tools. So you have what's known as hand crews. They're a group generally of 20 men and women who use construction tools, landscaping tools, shovels, picks, axes, chainsaws, and their goal is to open these fire lines in the wild, and that is a wide trail devoid of anything that burns, including the vegetation. And there's a hierarchy on these crews. Hotshots are at the top of this hierarchy, and they're the ones that work closest to the flames. So they have the riskiest, the most difficult tasks, and they're also the most trained, the best trained, the most equipped to face these fires.
They're hiking into these places, these heavy packs. They have to carry their own water.
Right.
Usually it's like 100+ degrees. It's
Right.
pretty brutal work.
It is incredibly brutal, not just on the body, but also it's mentally a challenge. They work 16-hour days for 14 days straight, and then they have 2 mandatory days off. So the battle is, you know, hiking in just to get to your workplace, sometimes 2-3 hours through very difficult terrain in the heat, as you mentioned. And then they get there, they start to work. At the end of their workday, throughout the day as they're working, they might feel tired, they might feel dizzy from the heat, they might feel crampy, but they have to keep going because they have a job to perform. And this is a job that's done by a team. So it's not like one of them can coast while the 19 other works. No, they all have to do their role, because if the guy ahead on the line is not doing it right, then the guy behind it won't be able to do it as well. And then that causes a delay for the whole team. And so, you know, it is a job not for everybody. It's almost like being a soldier. You know, you kind of have to be a certain kind of person to fit into that role.
What was different about the Granite Mountain Hotshots, and why were people, you know, despite everything you just said, incredibly competitive to get into them?
Well, that crew, so hotshot crews in this country are, for the most part, federal crews. At the time the Granite Mountain Hotshots were fighting their last season, 2013, there were only 2 municipal hotshot crews in the whole country. They were both based in Arizona. One was Granite Mountain, the other one was the Ironwood Hotshots, part of a fire district near Tucson. And of these 2, only Granite Mountain worked under the auspices of a structural fire department. So they were part of a city fire department, a division of a city fire department. And because they were under a city and not the federal government, they had a little more freedom to hire. They could be a little more creative and more selective in the types of people they wanted to be part of their crew. And the superintendent of the crew, the leader of that crew, Eric Marsh, was a recovering alcoholic. And he had been sober for 13 years when he died, but that experience informed the way by which he picked the people for his crew. He believed that he had a role not only in training them to be great firemen, but also to be great men and women. And he had a very soft spot for people he felt needed a second chance. To him, it was about finding certain people every season who had fallen down, had picked themselves up, and were ready to to shine and do very well, but needed a guiding hand to take them and make them exercise their potential. And that was sort of what set Granite Mountain apart from a lot of the other crews.
Now, that also played a role in the fact that they were not necessarily full employees of the city, so they were contractors, so they didn't have vacation or
Right.
health benefits.
Right.
One guy, you talk about him praying for fire to pay for health insurance.
Right.
For
That's
his wife
Billy
and child.
Warnke. Yeah, Billy Warnke was a Marine. He had fought in Iraq. He came back and he joined Granite Mountain in 2013. And his wife Roxanne was pregnant with their first child, and that was his biggest worry, was that he needed to make money so that he could pay for health insurance for when his baby was born.
And they weren't paid that well, so they had to get overtime
No,
to like
rookies
fund
made
this.
$12.09 an hour on Granite Mountain. And look, the way fire crews in general are structured, both in municipal crews and federal crews, is that you have a number of people who are full-time employees, so they have the benefits that any full-time employee has. Paid vacation, paid holidays, paid sick days. But then you have a group of them, a number of them, who are seasonal employees. In fact, we talk about the fire season. So these people are hired, generally speaking, from mid-April through mid-October, and then they go out and do other jobs. That was the case with Granite Mountain. The difference with Granite Mountain was that because they worked for the city of Prescott, once the fire season was over, the seasonal employees would be terminated, and then a new contract would start shortly after that, where they would work in the off-season, chipping brush, thinning forests around the city, sort of doing the protective work, the defensive work, in case a big fire burned on the outskirts of Prescott, which is a city surrounded by forests. So essentially they had a full-time workload, but they didn't qualify for the benefits because of this sort of two-contract type of system that the city had, which in the end ended up resulting in lawsuits by some of the families so that they could get the full-time benefits that they felt they were entitled to.
Now, set the context where this fire happened. Yarnell, who lived there, the extent of the development that grew up near the national forests.
So Yarnell is a remote, somewhat hard to get to mountain town in central Arizona. It has about 600 residents, doesn't have any industry, any reason. People live there either because they retired and they want to be sort of in this remote place, or as I say in the book, they want to forget or be forgotten. They just want to live their lives in peace in a place that's cool, that's not hot like Phoenix, but that's still somewhat close to Phoenix. And it's a very tight-knit community. The brush around here now, it's a mix of federal land and state land, had not burned in a little over 40 years. And there had been no work to thin that brush. In fact, the fire chief, who I met last week, there was another fire in Yarnell, said that only to walk through that bush in some parts you needed a chainsaw to sort of chop things down so that you could get through it. And that fire was started, like many fires in the West, are started during the monsoon season. A bolt of lightning struck a cluster of parched brush, started this fire in the evening of June 28th, 2013, a Friday. And by the time Granite Mountain Hot Shots got to the fire on Sunday, the fire had already dodged every effort that they made to stop it. And it was still not a big fire, but it became very big when a storm approached that day.
It basically a huge thunderstorm kind of collided with it, made a U-turn. There was this downdraft. It became this inferno, and they were trying to take a shortcut to a ranch through a place that was full of brush, and they got trapped. Basically.
I don't know if I would say a shortcut.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't make any final conclusion as to why they made the decision they made, because obviously none of them are here to explain to us, what led them to make that decision. But two things are very obvious to me. One is that they would not have taken that path had they not believed that this was something they could do. This was a very risky job, but not a job done by crazy people who would think, oh, let's try and see if we can make it type of thing. It's something that they did with a very deep level of responsibility and understanding that the goal ultimately is to go home safe at night. So whatever information they had at hand when they assessed their position in the fire and their role in that fire, they felt that the best thing to do was to go down this canyon where the fire had not burned, so it was full of brush, towards a ranch. And beyond the ranch, just beyond that ranch, was the town of Yarnell. And what everybody believes, they had been called twice to go to the town. And what a lot of people believe is that they were going there to make themselves useful once the fire got there and try to protect some of the homes there. It's not really the role of a wildland firefighter, but faced with that situation, many of them end up working what's known as structure protection. They start working to try to save the homes that are there from burning.
You mentioned the lawsuits, and some of the families filed wrongful death lawsuits, not necessarily later for monetary gain. They wanted to see changes
Right.
in the way decisions were made, resources allocated. What was it about this day and this fire that prompted people to say things need to change systemically? And has any of that happened?
Well, I'll start with the second part of the question. The short answer is no, and largely because the fire happened in state land. And for any big structural change to happen, it has to start from the federal government, from the federal crews, because they are essentially the ones that dominate this world of wildland firefighting. But, with every story, there's a lot of shades of gray. There are obviously lessons learned by the firefighters who still do this job. So if you go to the firefighting academy, it's something that's talked about in classes. In fact, I've taken 3 different courses in wildland firefighting, and I recently took one where it was heavily discussed, the fire in Yarnell, and how do you spot the human factors. It could be that you're the best trained firefighter, but you wake up that morning and you argue with your wife or your husband or your kid, and you go to the fire with that in your head. I mean, it happens to all of us. It just sort of colors our day. And so how do you spot somebody who's not totally there? How can you anticipate, how can you raise a red flag, even if it's not necessarily your role to do that? How can you empower the rookies, the underlings, to speak up if they think that some decision is not the best decision to be made at that point? So that's one side of things. There are bigger issues about communication. They're still to be resolved. Of course, it's difficult with radio communications when you have mountains in the way interfering, and also location. There is a very preliminary plan in Congress right now that would equip these crews with GPS equipment, where you would be able to pinpoint their location and therefore inform a specific crew that, look, you're in a perilous position, stay there, give them an order to stay there, or give them an order at that moment to leave because there's enough time to leave. But the families, they are working. Some families have formed nonprofit groups. One of them is called the Wildland Firefighter Guardian Institute, and they are specifically working to force these types of changes in training and in equipment that's given to the firefighters.
So were the Granite Mountain Hotshots reconstituted after they lost 19 men?
No, essentially the day the 19 members died was the day the crew died. For a while it was the big question in town, in Prescott, are we ever going to revive, is the city ever going to revive this crew? But, it became a political question and also a financial question. There was a, big liability, of course, when you lose 19 members of a fire department, your insurance goes up, and there was only so much risk, I guess, at that point, and a lot of fear that something could happen again. So the decision was made that it just was not worth it to reconstitute that crew.
Well, Fernanda, thank you so much for talking with us about this book.
It was great to be here.